Titanic was called the ship of dreams. And it was. It really was.
Matt.
Yes.
This is the episode.
This is what you've been waiting for since the start.
Yeah. This is the only reason I asked you to do it. Complete lie. I didn't want to do any of the rest.
We're going to cancel the podcast after this. It's over.
Yeah, this is my episode.
It is.
Without a doubt.
You know Titanic inside out, I think.
Oh, don't tell them that now. If I get something wrong now, I'm going to get comments saying you got that wrong.
No. Well, I don't know. I don't think anyone would notice if you did.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah, I believe you.
Today we're doing, as you may have gathered, the Titanic film by James Cameron in 1997.
Yes.
Big blockbuster. You may have heard of it.
It's
did rather
relatively well known.
Yeah. So we are doing a whole host of things today. So we're going to start off with a quiz.
Yes.
Obviously. We've got to test Matt's knowledge. We did say that it was a bit pointless me doing it because it would just be a little bit redundant.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing that first, and then we're going to go straight into some fact and fiction, talk about sets, the cast, what was portrayed on screen, how accurate was it, things like that. Then we're going to move into some themes, talk a whole load about special effects, and then the legacy of the film.
Yep.
So that's the agenda for today.
Woohoo.
So I have one question for you, Matt.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Are you ready for the quiz?
I don't think I'll ever be ready. Is that what you wanted to hear? I don't know.
No, I don't know. Well, let's see. Let's see how we go.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
First question.
Yeah.
What was the name of the Russian ship that was undertaking the dives to the wreck?
Oh, God, I wrote this down as well. Hang on, I can tell you what. Oh, I know the name of the little thing that went down because that had a name. I can't remember if it's named the ship or not. It was one of them called like Duncan or Duncan. I think that was the camera that went down.
That's the little ROV. Yeah.
I don't remember.
No, the ship, the actual ship, was a little bit bigger than that.
Oh. Yeah, no, sorry, pass.
The name of the Russian ship was the Academic Keldysh.
Oh, see, no, I wouldn't have. No.
Okay.
It's going
Second
well.
one. This is probably going to be a little bit easier for you, and you've got options here.
Oh, good.
So,
Options.
Name 3 Titanic officers. There were 6, so you've got a chance here to.
Does the captain count? Is he an officer?
No, the captain does not
count.
count.
For God's sake. Okay, so there was a Mr. Murdoch.
Yes.
The rest are going to be made up. You do know that. Mr. Sampson. He's an important one. And
that would be a no.
And I'll put a Smith in. I know there's not a Smith. Mr. Smith.
That would be incorrect.
I knew it.
Your answers could have been Officer Wilde,
Okay.
Officer Murdoch,
Oh, got him.
Officer Lightoller,
No.
Officer Pittman, which you'd never have got because he's not mentioned in the film.
That's brilliant.
Officer Boxall, who was also not mentioned in the film.
Wow.
Officer Lowe.
Oh, yeah.
And Officer Moody.
Oh, right.
Who is also mentioned.
Right. Oh, no, I didn't pick up. To be honest, a lot of them look the same to me as well. You know, when they're all dressed quite similar. Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
It's going well.
It's yeah. I'll give you maybe 0.3 of a point there.
Oh, okay. I'll take that.
For your one. Take your 0.3 there.
These are pretty harsh, you know. I wasn't watching it that closely.
This one you should get.
Okay.
What deck was Jack being held for stealing the necklace?
Steerage? Is that a thing?
Where was she taken? Where did she go on the elevator? Which deck did she go
Oh,
to?
sorry. She went down to E, I think. Bottom
That's
one?
right. Well done.
Is that the bottom one?
E deck.
Oh, thank God for that.
That is correct. So we've got 1.3. That's, we're getting somewhere.
1.3.
Okay. How many people were on board Titanic?
Does it have to be exact?
They say it after the sinking, so just if you try and recall back, you just say, they ask him how many people on board.
In total, including crew, I think it was 2,200.
Yes, well done.
Is that right?
Yep, that's right, yeah.
I'm not good with numbers until I have to remember a number.
Well, you're not going to like this one then.
Oh God.
You're not going to like this. This
Okay.
is a number. How many people were saved from the water?
From the water at the end.
Yeah.
6 in real life.
Yes, well
Yes.
done. Yeah.
See, I'm good at remembering little numbers.
Okay. What colour were the distress rockets?
What when they've gone bang?
Yes, when they've gone bang.
I don't really remember them having much of a colour. They were just kind of like white.
That's correct.
Is it? Yes.
However, that is incorrect.
It's factually
in reality,
incorrect, yeah.
because yes, they were actually coloured rockets. White was included, but it turned out they actually found some rockets on the seabed and they were coloured.
All right.
So there you go.
Cool.
What did Rose's mother ask the maid to do whilst they went out to the lifeboats?
She said, I don't know the exact words. I think she said something like turn the heater on or turn the radiator on.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah?
Yep, that's it. Put the heater on because she'll want a cup of tea when she returns.
That's it, yeah. I'm turning this around. I'm quite pleased now.
Yeah, you're doing well now. What was Rose's surname when she boarded the Russian ship Keldysh, and where had she come from?
Her name when she got on the this is where I make up surnames again. Oh God, it'll come to me when I hear it, but I don't really remember. So I'll say her name was Rose Hannigan.
Okay,
Sorry.
it's not that one.
When
but
you say it,
okay.
I'll be like, yeah, of course it is.
And where did she come from?
I don't know. She had a big fancy house in LA.
Okay, all right. Her surname was Calvert.
Yeah, see, I know
when
that.
She,
Rose
yeah,
Calvert,
when she
see.
got on the ship, and she
Yeah.
came from Cedar Rapids.
Oh, so not LA.
Okay, so this one you should get. How did Cal make his fortune?
He something to do with. Ooh, it's either something to do with metal, or it's something to do with oil.
Okay, what are you gonna go?
Will you let
with?
me know if I've narrowed it down right?
You have narrowed it down.
Okay,
Right.
I think it's to do with oil. It's not metal, is it?
No, I'm afraid you're wrong.
Is it iron?
I'm afraid you're wrong. It's steel.
Steel.
It's steel. Yep. He was heir to a steel company.
I knew it was something to do with iron.
Okay. Who were the old couple on the bed?
Okay, they're a real couple.
They are.
And their names were like. It was like Ida and Isadore somebody.
That's correct.
Can I have that?
I'll give you that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know
it
the
was
surname.
Isadore and Ida Strauss.
That's right.
I think he was the director or the owner of Macy's at the time.
All right.
In America.
Yeah.
Okay, this one you might struggle with. What is Lovejoy's first name? I'll give you a clue. It is not actually a real name.
Not a real name.
I've never heard anybody with this name.
I feel like I read it on IMDb
And thought, that's weird.
and thought, yeah, I'll remember that, but clearly, his name is Chowder.
I mean, it may as well be. His name was Spicer.
Spice. Nah, that's not what I remember.
Spicer Lovejoy.
No, I don't remember that now.
Stupid name.
Stupid name for stupid
Okay,
man.
your last question.
Yeah.
How many Oscars was Titanic nominated for, and how many did it win?
Nominated 14.
Correct.
Won 11.
Well done.
Yeah, I'm good at Oscar stuff.
Okay. That's why I put that one in there for you.
Just a little treat at the end.
Right, so. Okay, out of 12,
Yeah.
you got 7.3.
7.3. I'll take that. I thought it'd be a lot
I
worse.
think that's I'm quite impressed. Considering you said you were very, very nervous about the quiz, I'm very impressed.
I didn't do research as such to memorise facts. I just thought, if it goes in,
There
it
was
goes
too
in.
many other things you were trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Not trying to remember names of people who aren't even mentioned in the film. Okay,
Okay, so we're going to set the scene a little bit with a few facts. sets.
Mhm.
So, Titanic was built for the White Star Line along with her sister ships Olympic and Britannic. She was to be a luxury transatlantic liner. She was 882 feet in length, 175 feet high from waterline to boat deck. She weighed 46,000 tons, used 825 tons of coal per day, had a max speed of 24 knots, 16 watertight compartments, a crew capacity of 900 and a passenger capacity of 2,439. She actually had 897 crew and 1,309 passengers, so she was nowhere near full, thankfully. Otherwise, it'd be even worse. She set sail on the 10th of April from Southampton. It went to pick up passengers at Cherbourg in France. Amongst these were some of the richest passengers on the ship: John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Molly Brown, all of whom are portrayed in the film. On the morning of the 11th of April, it picked up passengers from Queenstown, Ireland, which is now known as Cobh, I think, and headed out into the Atlantic Ocean for New York. There were, at that time, 324 first-class passengers, 277 second-class passengers, and 708 third-class passengers. So you can see it was
Quite a lot.
literally taking third-class passengers to a new life. It was very much an immigrant ship. The Titanic struck an iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on Sunday the 14th of April and sank beneath the waves at 2:20 a.m. in just 2 hours and 40 minutes. If you were a first-class female, you had 97% survival rate.
Oh wow. Okay.
If you were a third-class male, you had 15% survival
I
rate.
had no chance.
It's not good. When you look at the overall of who was saved, it's very bad. The total on board survived was 711. 1,495 people died, and that is 32.2% survival, which is really not good.
No, it's not great. So let's make a rom-com about this.
I know. Yeah, so basically, we'll jump into our fact and fiction section. So, through a love story of two star-crossed lovers, however unlikely it may seem, and I'm sure we'll cover that in a theme section, it is through them that we explore the ship. Cameron designed their story to show audiences as much of the ship as possible in the first half of the movie. The details of the fictional fit around the real people and the sets perfectly in minute detail. James Cameron was considered a perfectionist before Titanic.
Wow, yeah.
But he took it to new heights with this production. He hired the same companies that manufactured parts and furnishings for the ship in 1912 to recreate the work. Historians such as Ken Marshall and Don Lynch were closely involved in creating the ultimate authenticity. Marshall even stated he didn't even think of it as a set. It felt like standing on the actual ship. Yeah. Cameron was searching not only for historical authenticity but visual accuracy through exact replicas. And in a lot of ways he did that. So I'm going to jump straight into the sets.
Yes.
So there was a superb mix of sets and miniatures in this film. It's unbelievable. So like I said, the first half celebrates the ship. The sinking was so far away, literally, because it's such a long film. There was no concept of it being a possibility. It was carefree. You're enjoying the sheer luxury. That's what they're showing you. And this helps anchor the second half of the movie, adding the emotion that you've seen the ship and it's being lost. And the characters along with it. And we're shown the promenade decks, the dining rooms, first and third class cabins, the engine room, the poop deck, etc., etc., etc. You just see unbelievable amounts. And this familiarises the audience with the ship for later.
Absolutely.
So Cameron, unprecedented at the time, was the first director to actually see the wreck before making a film about Titanic. There's been many Titanic films before, but they'd never actually seen the wreck. They didn't find it until 1985. So a dive took place to the wreck in 1995, and shots made at the wreck, which they wanted to use in the film, actually helped create the wreck model that they made. So it was a good mix of both model and real life wreck footage,
Mhm.
which I think people don't really realise.
Yeah.
So they made a set that was going to look like it had been underwater for 80 years. They burnt the sets and then, and then messed around with it some more, then burnt it some more.
Yeah.
And then they lowered them into a tank.
Mhm.
So it's a huge endeavour. Rose is sweet in the movie, just as an example of the minute detail they went to. The room she would have been in, the millionaire suite. JP Morgan was supposed to be in that room, but decided last minute not to sail, so they knew that room was empty.
Mhm.
And they decorated that suite based on the Olympic, because
Yeah.
they didn't actually know exactly what it looked like. But when they dived to the wreck after the film, because he did go back and do more subsequent dives afterwards, they found that how they decorated it was completely correct.
Yeah, this is where the clock
To
was
the
on
clock
the
on the mantelpiece, amazingly still there.
intact, and
Incredible.
well, they nailed
Yeah.
it down anyway, didn't they? But it was
Yeah.
almost like it had been untarnished. It was still
Yeah.
completely perfect, apart from you couldn't read the time on the clock.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think that after what it had gone through, that it was still there.
Yeah,
It's
there's something
unbelievable.
quite, I don't know, there's something beautiful about it,
Oh,
isn't
God,
there?
yeah.
Oh, it's kind of like a ghost ship as well, isn't it? Well, it technically is, I suppose.
Well, it is, yeah.
And yeah, there's just something nice about seeing that one perfectly preserved bit.
Yeah, and like the stained glass window that was still there, and things like that. It's things like that you think, wow, it was real.
The
It
ship
did.
had a life of its
Yeah.
own, didn't it? And a story.
So the Russian ship that they actually use, the Keldysh, in the film was actually the ship they used to dive the expedition on as well, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah.
The big one, the big set, was built in Baja, Mexico. The deck heights were accurate. The width was accurate. However, they only built the starboard side.
Yes.
Which saved them millions and millions and millions of dollars of an already very, very big budget. So that meant that scenes of the Southampton dock and loading the passengers, which was actually done on the port side, had to be done with a mirror image, which I
hilarious.
find absolutely fascinating. All of the hats have White Star Line written on them backwards.
Backwards.
All of the text is backwards.
All the buildings.
It's unbelievably funny.
Yeah.
When you actually see the behind the scenes, everybody's got all the stuff on backwards.
Yeah.
It's very funny. But I mean, the detail, just to get that right.
Yeah.
Because it actually was done on the port side. So they did everything backwards just to make sure that the reality was right.
Yeah, they could very easily have just flipped it and that would have been it. But he wouldn't have settled for that.
Yeah, exactly. And in reality, they did actually take 3 20-foot sections out of the ship and put it together. There's never a shot of the ship end to end because it never existed.
Yeah.
That also saved them quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I hate to disappoint people. The money shot, the King of the World shot, that just would not have been able to happen in reality because that section was not open to passengers, so you would never have been able to get there. One of my favourite sets is the Grand Staircase. It's like the heart of the ship, isn't it?
Yeah.
Its actual dimensions were slightly smaller in reality. They added 18 inches to the set because people were actually smaller in 1912 and they couldn't actually get 2 people abreast on the stairs.
Yeah.
So they had to make it ever so slightly bigger. Other than that, it was the exact ship plans from the time.
Yeah.
Including the materials used. So when they sank it, they actually found out what might have happened in 1912.
Yeah.
There was a steel base under the wooden banister, and that was ripped up by the water, and the wood lifted because it was buoyant. And there's no sign of the staircase on the wreck. It's just a huge gaping space. And they came to the conclusion that from what they found during the shooting, that must have happened. It must have floated out.
I don't know how many films this has happened in where sort of art has imitated life, so that by just purely just trying to recreate the look of something aesthetically has actually informed more sort of academic studies of what has happened in history and things like that. I found that interesting.
It's really, really interesting that way. Right, well, I'm going to go into some details with you, Matt.
Okay.
Detail. That was just everything to James Cameron on this film. So the menus for the dinners were the menus from Titanic. The food was the actual meals that were known to have been served. The props were made identical. They had White Star Line china, glassware. The carpets were specially woven by the original manufacturers from the original designs, which they still had.
Wow.
The clothing, they found authentic pieces.
Mm-hmm.
All of the women wore corsets, even the extras. The people you were never going to see were dressed up to the nines. And they've all said that this helped create the part.
If you feel like you're there, then you're more likely to to believe it yourself.
Yeah, and this, I think, obviously we discussed this when it comes to themes, but it just shows you what the woman of the early 1900s had to kind of put up with. I mean, they couldn't dress themselves.
No, yeah.
You know, you couldn't do anything for yourself. You couldn't even take your hair down. It was like
Yeah.
an hour to get ready.
Yeah, for anything.
You were very dependent in more ways than one. So I think we'll discuss that a little bit later.
Yeah.
One of the I suppose props that they use, but it always has a huge impact on me, was the shoes in the wreck scenes.
Yeah.
You see all the shoes on the sand. That is really affecting to me, because that's a grave that bone dissolves extremely quick at that pressure underwater.
Yeah.
So there's no bodies in Titanic, but where the pairs of shoes are, that is where somebody was.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I just hadn't thought of it that way before.
I know.
I just imagine, the wardrobe's fallen over and all the shoes have fallen out.
Yeah, you don't think of it with that impact.
Or you just assume that any bodies would have just, I don't know, floated away, or they were already above board at that point. But no, yeah, when you look at it that way, it's frightening. That's why I call it a ghost ship, because it kind of is.
It's really sad, and the efforts they went to, I mean, to show all of this and the impact, the death makeup, for instance, incredible, absolutely incredible. I mean, the gelatine used with crystals and wax, and when that was sprayed with water, it would expand. And when you add that to the contact lenses they had to wear,
that's the scariest bit.
Yeah, it's eerie, and it looked real. It did. I mean, the fact that they were, working in tanks in the dark.
It's watching them floating sort of lifelessly as well. That's quite horrible.
There's something about it, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump onto cast now. So one of the things that's great about this film, that people don't really realise, I don't think, is the fictional characters are seamlessly interacting with real people.
Yeah, and they're usually the extras, sort of smaller parts.
Yeah, but a lot of these people were based on real people. So the cast were hired to look as similar to their real life counterparts as possible. So you've got Bernard Hill. Honest to God, if you see a picture of what Captain Smith actually looked like, it is ridiculous.
He just naturally looks like he looks like Captain Birdseye, doesn't he? He's just
he's a double. Kathy Bates as well. She is. I mean, you look at Molly Brown. She looks like her. She really does. And there's a number of first class passengers that on board that are shown in the film. So I've mentioned John Jacob Astor. He was the richest man on the ship. Benjamin Guggenheim was a millionaire. Countess of Roths. And many well-known crew members as well that are featured, including the officers, the band.
Yeah, of course.
There's so much in there. And there's so many historical links to characters and facts that even if you don't know them, the names or the significance of them, they're there. The fans and the historians will pick up on them and be able to spot them, but they're all there. And through the script, one of the things that he does quite a lot is he mentions little things. And it's kind of like little tips, little bits that
they're
he's
very
just
sort
adding
of
in there.
unsubtle, very little drops at history.
That's John Jacob Astor.
Yes.
He's the richest man on the ship.
I've written down a few here, like things like, oh yes, it's an Irish ship. It was built by Irish. All this
yes,
stuff.
Exactly.
And then the probing people, who came up with the name Titanic? Little things like that.
There's a lot. It was built to give you the facts, basically.
Yeah,
it's not a very complicated script, but it does give you a lot of the facts in there.
Yeah.
And there's little bits of like character work, like Lewis Bodine, who obviously he does the computer simulation to show us beforehand what's going to happen later, so that we understand basically how it's working.
And we know exactly what's going to happen later on in the film as well. Not that we didn't already know.
He actually went on the expedition after the film with James Cameron. He's a good friend of his, and Bill Paxton. They made Ghosts of the Abyss, the documentary, and that was their 2001 expedition
All right.
to the ship. So they even after the film, some of them were still involved with the history of it. Bill Paxton's character I find quite interesting because he kind of envelops a lot of people. I think that you could probably say modern day ideas
Yeah.
about the film. He embodies that typical treasure hunter kind of attitude, blasé, hungry for the material,
Yeah, to
but
sort
with
of
no
scavenge
thought to
it.
the
Yeah.
human element of it. But he has a very moving character arc in the film, which is kind of what happens to audiences as well, I feel, because you go into the film thinking, oh yeah, I know the ship it sank and people died and I know what happens, but it's kind of takes that human element away from it, and it's building the love story and the characters and putting them all in there. You understand what the sinking truly meant.
Yeah, it's easy to forget.
Yeah, they've brought that all forward. So I'm going to give you some facts portrayed on screen. You've already mentioned a few. So Tommy mentions that it was built in Belfast. The lack of binoculars is mentioned.
Yeah.
That was actually a thing. They didn't have Officer Lightoller as the second officer originally. They had a bit of a shuffle a few days before, and the actual second officer, David Blair, he left the ship. He was the last
Right.
one who had them, and they think he might have walked off with the keys accidentally
Oh God.
and locked them away. There's controversy to whether binoculars would have actually helped them or not, but
Yeah.
they mention it in there.
Yeah.
Only enough lifeboats for half the people on board. That's a key bit of info that obviously comes to the forefront later. The spinning top scene, I love that scene.
The little boy.
With the little boy.
Yeah.
That's actually created from a real photograph.
Oh, right.
There was a passenger on the ship called Francis Brown, and he took pictures on board. They're the only pictures in existence, and he left the ship at Queenstown in Ireland.
All right.
So there are actual pictures, and that is recreated from that picture. And Don Lynch, who was the film historian, he played the father in the cameo.
All right.
So I love that they've put that little bit of history in there, real life. The church service on the Sunday mornings led by Captain Smith, and the song that they sang is the real song they sang on the morning.
It's very foreboding, isn't it? Those in peril on the sea.
I know I wouldn't sing that if it was me.
Just a little bit.
Don't risk it.
We're just asking for this now, aren't we?
Yeah. The ice warnings that you see them given out to the captain, there were a number of ice warnings that were sent beforehand, which seem to have been ignored. The band played on deck to the end, and Nearer My God to Thee was reportedly the last song that was played before the ship went down. The really sad, the mother and baby that are frozen in the water, that's real.
Yeah.
That comes from Officer Lowe's account when he went back. The timings of the collision and the events all leading up to the sinking are all accurate. All the timings. The lifeboat's not being filled. Now that obviously you see that through Thomas Andrews' character in the movie. But he probably didn't do that in reality. It's just letting the audience know that the boats weren't filled.
It was, making the point.
Yeah, the only thing he didn't put in the movie that's not mentioned, and it's a huge part of the Titanic story, is the ghost ship, the Californian, which was reportedly seen on the horizon.
Yeah, and they ignored it.
Yeah, you can watch it in the deleted scenes, but he chose to take it out. They were apparently only a mere 5 miles away.
Yeah.
And obviously that would have changed the whole events of the evening. But obviously it was a very long film already, and he decided not to put that one in. He did take a few liberties, or artistic license.
Oh, a few.
Call it that. Yes, just a few. Not that many, surprisingly. Actually,
what I find weird about this is that for a film that he tried so hard to make authentic, he did add a lot of quite unnecessary fake elements, including major characters.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm sorry to disappoint you folks, but Jack Rose weren't real. I'm really sorry. All the people related to them, friends, family, they're also fictional. So the fiance, Carl, the mother, the manservant, Jack's friends, they're all fake, I'm afraid. And in reality, there is absolutely no way a third class passenger could have entered first class, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It was still just too strictly segregated at the time.
Mhm.
First Officer Murdoch, it was reported in reality that an officer shot himself
Yeah.
on board during the sinking,
Oh.
but it was never proven that it was Murdoch.
Yeah.
It could have easily been Chief Officer Wilde, and that caused quite a few issues after the film came out,
Yeah.
because Murdoch's relatives were understandably
Quite
upset
unhappy.
by
Yeah.
the portrayal, so they had to actually send out somebody from Fox to Scotland to apologise.
Is this where James Cameron said that it was the screenwriter in him getting carried away?
Exactly, yeah. He said he took liberties as a screenwriter and he didn't think about it as a historian, which is quite odd because in all of the other ways he
This
was
is it.
thinking about it
This
as
is why I think he was a little bit confused making the film at times,
Yes,
because
yeah.
he seemed to be in two.
Switch from one to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he has said, obviously, he didn't think about how the family would feel, but he would change the scene today. He
Yeah.
wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big one is the ship didn't sink exactly the way that it's portrayed in the film. The stern
Yeah.
splitting and the detachment of the bow, pulling it to 90 degrees, is not quite how it happens. It looks very dramatic, but it didn't stick up that far before the split. There's a number of investigations that have been done, a lot of them by James Cameron as well. They've made computer simulations and models that show how the water progresses and the stresses in the hull, and they've actually shown that it would have been about a 23-degree rise, which doesn't look quite as
It's more of a slight tilt.
as effective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would have been where the peak stresses led to the split. But when the film was made, they were working on the information they knew at the time.
That's true.
They
yeah.
have learnt a lot more since, and they were going off what they knew. Apparently, one thing I find really amazing: the lights didn't go out.
Oh, right.
They continued to glow right up until it was submerged, which is I find
that's
really,
interesting.
really weird. But it takes away from that kind of dramatic effect.
Yeah.
You know,
I am glad that they did change some things, just because
Yeah.
like that whole second half and the whole sinking it's frightening, and
Yeah.
with things like the lights going out and the electricity sparking, it is tempestuous in these corridors. I think it's incredible.
Absolutely. And then the big one, the kind of the controversy which got a lot of historians, was that the third class passengers were not locked in.
No, they weren't.
It's a very controversial issue. It really is. It was stated in the inquiry that this was not the case. But there's many who wonder about it because there were no third class passengers, no women and children available to put in the boats at certain points. There was nobody on deck, so where were they?
So they just loaded whoever they could.
Yeah, that what they worded it as in the inquiry basically meant that it had to be a no. You know, so it is very controversial.
Yeah.
And then obviously what happened to the real people? In such confusion and panic, it's unclear what happened to the real people represented in the film. They can only go on survivor accounts. So they're often obscure, contradicted. So, you know, audiences assume that historical films of this kind display the truth, but often, you know,
you can't, can you?
Yeah,
You can't
it's accepted.
exactly.
This is the thing with historical films; they're accepted as fact a lot of the time, and that's where you've got to be very careful as a filmmaker because it can be damaging to the memory of events, you know, because it blurs the fact and the fiction. So yeah. So Matt, it's all over to you. What themes does the film cover? Because it covers quite a few very big ones, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's only two big ones I will cover, one more than the other, and it's something that you've touched on all the way through, and that's social class, social hierarchy. It's one of those moments in history, I know we've got to remember to talk about it as history and not just as a film, that the ship itself, the idea of a ship of that size and of that structure, it's an appropriate vessel literally for demonstrating divide, because there's an upstairs downstairs kind of dichotomy to it there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your worth as a human being is essentially determined by your ticket holder status, which is essentially your wealth, because, you know, if you couldn't afford to buy the ticket.
Absolutely.
So right off the bat, we get a number of contrasts at the beginning, whether that's the way that different classes board the ship. For example, you see from Jack's perspective, he's gambling because he literally says he's got nothing to lose. He would be expected to line up and have a health inspection for lice in his beard. And,
Yeah.
well, he hasn't got a beard, but in his hair. Versus somebody like Rose and her party who board the ship, and they have several cars of luggage.
Definitely not have lice.
Yeah, well, exactly. They just walk straight onto the ship. So already, that contrast already being shown. And then the next thing we get is the rooms, and again these are cut between each other. In third class, there's 4 to a room. It's prison-like. They're like bunk beds. Very little daylight.
So, yeah, it's like a cell.
Exactly.
No
Yeah.
room. Yeah.
There's rumours of rats, which we do see later on. And this cuts to the complete opposite end of the ship, or wherever it is. This is your private promenade deck, sir. They're hanging paintings.
Yes.
They're bringing the safe in.
That was the millionaire suite. They didn't all have their own promenades. That was an exception.
and they're all drinking champagne and so on. There's talk throughout the film of, this is my part of the ship, this is your part of the ship. There's signs that show that, third class, you're not allowed beyond this point. Yet the first class can come and walk their dogs and do their business on the third class part of the ship. However, I say this, when it comes to having fun, there's a juxtaposition of the two sort of parties. One which is lively and liberating and wholesome, which, funnily enough, is the underclass in steerage.
Yeah.
And the other half, which is meant to be like the luxurious part of the ship, is actually the most boring and
strict and pompous,
very
and
stiff.
Stiff. Yeah.
So all the way through the film, we get the idea of these two very different worlds. So it made me ask, what then is the film trying to say? And I think, most of all, it's a critique and a criticism of the upper class and their values. So it's ironic when it's Rose who tries to commit suicide, because of the two characters, of Jack and Rose, the guy who's got nothing and the girl who seems to have everything you could seemingly want on the surface. And she even says to Jack, she said, I know what you're thinking. Poor little rich girl, what does she know of misery? But the narration from older Rose says, my life was just an endless parade of very superficial things, narrow people, mindless chatter, parties, yachts, polo matches, and it's just not a fulfilling life for her.
Cameron's got a very strong view of the Edwardian class. Very strong. He skips out second class altogether to show the bigger divide. And he does kind of boil it down to very much black and white, like rich equals bad, poor equals good.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that Rose actually picks up on a lot of this herself and tells Jack when they go to the restaurant, all the social elite passengers, they're not as squeaky clean as they would appear.
No.
There's scandals, people have got mistresses, concealed pregnancies, lots of controversies and drama going on under the surface. And I guess this sort of facade that they put on is evident when Jack is only accepted when he dresses up in the clothes.
Absolutely.
But the very next day he's not recognised and he's told his presence isn't appropriate.
All they see is the look.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yep. Everything revolves around wealth or the appearance of wealth. Molly even says to him, remember, they love money, pretend you own a gold mine and you're in the club.
Yeah.
And then another part that I think is really good is when Rose's mother lectures her and basically says to her, this isn't a game.
Yeah.
And their whole reputation is based on their family name because that is their survival.
Yeah. I have to admit, as I've got older, yes, she's the villain, quote unquote,
one of
the piece. Yeah. But I do actually feel quite sorry for her because she is right. What's she going to do if she doesn't get her daughter married off?
Yeah.
And because that's going to support her. What's she going to do? They had no options, women then.
Yeah. If you're born into wealth, it's not something you've necessarily asked for.
Yeah.
In the same way, if you're born into absolutely zero money at all. So yeah, I do see your point. There's really this is one of my favourite points I'm going to make in this episode, and it's about costume and specifically Rose's costume.
Yes.
The three things that is referenced is the corset, which you mentioned, the engagement ring, and the necklace, which Cal obviously presents to her. It's not only used to signal, obviously, she's a much higher class, but also to criticise it because her clothes and her jewellery, they suffocate her.
Yeah.
The corset means she can't breathe. The necklace is like a noose around her neck.
I've never thought of it like that. That's a really good analogy. That.
And the ring, Jack even says you would have gone right to the bottom.
Yeah.
So everything that she wears symbolises the lifestyle that would have killed her.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I think they draw attention to those moments.
Yeah, they push that. And he actually says that later on, doesn't he? That her character, eventually, that spark that she has would burn out. So, yes, she didn't jump off the ship now, but she would maybe do something later
Yeah.
on because she would just become overwhelmed. It would happen at some point
Yeah,
or
for
another.
as long as she was dressed up that way, I suppose.
Yeah, stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But then, obviously, on the other side, let's look at Jack.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote: "My mother looked at him like he was an insect."
Mm-hmm.
There's an assumption that he's, I don't know, attacked Rose or tried to rape her, or when he pulls her back over the railings,
Mm-hmm.
he's called filth. His reward for saving Rose is an invite to dinner where Cal knows that he won't fit in and he will be humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
Something that Molly confirms. She said, "You're about to go into the snake pit."
Yeah.
And she's right, because when he's there at dinner with them, Cal proceeds to point out that, "Oh, Jack joins us from third class," and it's very patronising.
Yeah.
He says that the conversation after dinner won't interest you.
Yeah.
Rose's mother criticises his rootless existence,
Yeah.
which is where I think Cameron's voice then comes in to say his life philosophy is that he's alive and the best thing he can do is make every day count. And he kind of gives them a run for their money in that sense by politely calling them out on their over-reliance on status. So I think that's clever as well. Bit of a clever bit of screenwriting from James Cameron there.
Yeah, you can hear his voice come out of it in certain points during the film.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's the job of a filmmaker, isn't it?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
put their point across,
Mhm.
and it's definitely there.
And we mentioned Molly Brown. She's such an interesting character. She's excluded because she wasn't born into wealth. She's what they call new money.
Yeah.
Obviously, her husband struck it rich.
So she's more normal, basically.
Exactly. She's
Big
louder,
and bold and brash.
speaks her mind. This isn't necessarily her crowd of people, although her wealth would suggest it is. One of the only times we do see her fitting in, when the others aren't calling her that vulgar brown woman, is when she talks about money, or literally burning it, is the story that she's telling. She's telling a story about how they're burning money. So she knows how to play the game. She knows how to speak their language. And yeah, she's the only character, really, the only wealthy character, to help Jack the clothes and the cutlery.
Actually has heart.
Yeah, and because she's come from a similar place to him.
Yeah.
And she bridges these two social classes. So she's actually a really important character, and luckily not one that was invented. She was one that was real. So I really like her character.
Molly Brown, really, her story starts after the sinking.
Mm.
She wasn't really known for anything beforehand, but her story started in the lifeboats and then carried on well after that.
Yeah.
She was a very important lady.
Mm.
She really did have an effect.
Yeah, he did the right thing to use her for his fictionalized account.
Definitely.
So, putting all things into perspective, what does this all mean when it comes to the sinking of the ship, according to the film? The workers are locked in, the emergency flood doors close, the poor are the first to die because they're the last to be saved. First class are prioritised for lifeboats. Lower classes are trapped below. As we know, that didn't really happen, but
it makes a point.
It makes the point, yeah.
It does.
Even then, though, the upper class only care about whether, are the lifeboats going to be seated according to class. Cal's making little smart comments about the first class, half of the passengers likely to survive being the better half. And in the end, actually, however, all social hierarchy is leveled out at the end because everyone's in the same situation. And you see that when Cal tries to buy his way out.
Yeah, your money can't save you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then looking even broader with respect to, I guess, everybody in charge, everybody who designed the ship and who captained it, the film calls out their arrogance.
Hubris.
Yeah. Prioritizing luxury and achievement and media attention over the safety of the passengers. These sort of ridiculous claims that the ship is unsinkable. Even the designer himself said, "Well, it's made of iron. Yes, I assure you, it can sink."
Now, apparently, the unsinkable aspect didn't come in until years later. At the time, nobody was apparently saying that.
Oh, right.
But I think it's just the fact that obviously there'd been the Industrial Revolution and man-made invention was at its peak.
Yeah, exactly.
There was this transatlantic boom of crossing the oceans and setting speed records, and nothing of any kind like Titanic had ever happened, you know, and it was the height of luxury and it was huge, and this couldn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, there was no idea, no concept, because it could just, they just didn't think it could happen. It was pure ignorance.
But obviously in the film again, where James Cameron's really nailed the point in, it's kind of summed up in a Freud reference that Rose makes, that they're compensating.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there was a quote I heard, I have no idea where it's from, but it says the whole thing was a tribute to man's arrogance, and I think that just sort of rounds off
Absolutely.
that critique of the social elite.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's social class. I've got only a couple of points to make on gender, which again you touched on.
Yeah.
The significance of the ship, like her clothing for Rose, it's a prison, so she refers to it
Yeah.
as a slave ship. An older version of her says, outwardly, I was everything a well-brought-up girl should have been, but inside I was screaming. And there's numerous examples of how she is controlled and subjugated by, you know, people who are meant to be either her family or family to be.
Yeah.
Whether it's smoking, people ordering food on her behalf. She's followed around the ship. She's berated like a child. She's physically
Yeah.
threatened. She said, "You will honor me."
Yeah. As a wife is supposed to honor
Yeah,
her husband.
exactly.
Because that's what it was like at the time.
She's blackmailed, basically, into marrying Cal. He basically says, "There's nothing I couldn't give you if you would not deny me," which is where the necklace comes in. The whole engagement is a financial and social arrangement, backed up
Absolutely.
by Rose's own mother. And at one point she says, "Of course it's unfair. We're women. Our choices are never easy." But ironically, Rose doesn't have a choice.
Yeah, no
Again,
choice at all.
another little bit of clever writing that I do actually enjoy. And then the other thing is how Rose's intelligence is kind of ridiculed.
Yeah.
There's one part, the scene starts and they're all sat around the table, and Rose's mother says, "The purpose of university is to find a suitable husband." Rose has already done that. It's just like, what the hell? It's just,
It's the way that they thought about people, about women, about what you could do is just, it's so backwards.
Exactly, yeah.
But I love what he did with Rose, because he broke that. He's like smashed that later on, because she became, he was known for his modern, you know, kick-ass women. I mean, you had Linda Hamilton in Terminator, and he did not to the same effect with Rose, but she's the one who saved Jack. You know, she got the axe. She became this, you know, powerful woman.
Yeah.
And it ends with her making her own choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Living life the way she wanted to live. So he kind of smashed all that apart with her. And I think that's one of the appeals, especially to younger girls.
Yeah.
You know, going to see it in the 90s, she looked after herself. She had a voice and she used it.
Yeah. The other thing as well is her love of art. It's kind of laughed at. They've told all these Monets and whatever, those finger paintings and
something Picasso.
Things
never
like
amount to a thing.
And then obviously after her Freud reference, Cal says, "I might have to start minding what she reads from now on."
It's awful.
So yeah, to summarise, you know it's true love then when Rose meets Jack, who's an artist, shares her open-mindedness, offers her an opportunity to escape and see the world, but also someone who sees her for who she is.
Not going to tell her what to do.
Exactly.
That would be nice.
And who promises that he'll do everything with her or to support her. You jump, I jump is the thing that they repeat. Although she does say at one point, "It's not up to you to save me, Jack," which links into what you've just said, but she does go back to him 30 seconds later of her own choice. So yeah, social class and gender are the ones that are really highlighted in the film.
Okay, well, let's jump straight into effects then. So you've looked very closely at this.
Yeah, I've tried.
I mean, it's obvious. It's very obvious, the effects. So, well, a lot of the effects. You know, it's not just been, you know, done as is. There's a lot there. A lot went into it.
And before we properly go into it, I forgot really that this was 1997. This is before even things like The Matrix came out, which I think is important to remember, because some of the things that The Matrix is sort of hailed as being the pioneer of, actually maybe not so much the case. So first of all, it's a blend. Everything really is a blend of practical effects and visual effects, which are sort of composited, which is basically just combined. And not to say that it's perfect. I'll get onto that. But yeah, most of the shots, or the effect shots at least in the film, are a combination of motion controlled camera shots, which is basically cameras that are programmed to repeat the same movements over and over again, which means that different elements can be matched perfectly. Physically scaled down models of the ship, painted backgrounds, things shot against green screen so that they could add in backgrounds or foregrounds.
Yeah.
And other digital CGI elements, which is computer generated imagery. And motion captured characters, which I've got a lot to say
They
about.
were the worst.
Oh,
yeah,
you will
that's
get
probably
there.
the least.
So yeah, I could give a million examples, but I won't. In the first half of the film is where the visual effects, like the more computer generated stuff, is more prevalent. There's one particular shot, they refer to it as the $1 million shot because it nearly cost that much. And this is where Jack and his friend are on the front of the ship, and it sort of pulls away from them round the back of the ship and up over the top of the ship, and you kind of end almost diagonally opposite on the other side of the ship as it sails away.
Yeah.
So, from a practical perspective, that would just start.
A deep breath there. Let's get going.
From a practical perspective, they started with helicopter footage of similar ships.
Yeah.
That sort of was their blueprint. That's how they were going to copy the shot.
Yeah.
So they started by doing a motion-controlled camera on their model of the ship, doing that motion. Sort of more semi-practical things. We would have Leo stood on a turntable against green screen, which represented the front of the ship, and it would turn, but the camera would pull back, and that would be added into the shot. So all of a sudden now you've got a shot of ship with Jack on it. Next part,
Yep.
we're now talking digital. When the camera's pulled back as far as it could go physically, this is where the CGI took over. He was replaced with a CGI character, and all of the fully CGI elements are then added in, sort of in layers. So the CGI water, digital smoke, the background, the scenery, and the sky. Anything from birds. There's a flag. Everything. There's hundreds and hundreds of elements going on that all had to blend perfectly in with anything that was shot live to create this illusion. Then we get to the people. So they populated the ship.
The people.
Why did they do this? Right, I've got a lot to say here. So they went to a great effort of dressing people up, giving people little stories, little situations, and they would film this, but give them sort of, little dots on the costume so that they could capture it into a computer, mimic those, and then use them for CGI characters. All this effort to make them real people, all given a personality. The motion capture CGI people in the end are waxy, mannequin-like. They walk in right angles. There's very little detail on them. They very barely look like they have any weight or that they're actually touching the surface of the deck.
Couple of floating.
They sort of glide. They glide along the.
Mark did notice that the other day when we were watching it. He said they're floating.
Just awful. And I get from James Cameron's perspective, he wanted to be the pioneer of this, the innovator of that. He wanted to be the first to do all these things that he started with Terminator and things like that. Why? They've already basically just filmed the people. They could have just put the real people on the ship. Why it had to be CGI people, I do not understand, because it does not look good.
It's the oldest part of the film. I think it dates it the most.
Yeah, and those shots, and I get they cost a lot of money. There was a lot of good visual effects in there. Does it work? I don't know. Could it have been cut? Maybe.
I've got one thing just to argue the point for it. Just one little thing, and it is something my husband mentioned as well. You don't really look at the people necessarily as much as they're not the attraction. You're supposed to be looking at the ship. So I suppose that was a smaller element. So maybe they were hoping that you would be looking at
that
the
you wouldn't
majesty
notice
of it all, and and that you wouldn't notice. Yeah.
See, I don't remember seeing it before watching it again this time, but obviously when the 3D re-release came out in 2012, I'm surprised I didn't notice it then either.
Yeah.
Unless they'd made some tweaks, I don't think they would have done.
Well, no, do you know what they didn't? He actually said, and I respect him a lot more for it actually. He said that he wasn't going to go back and change anything, because where do you stop once you started? And I mean that is true. I mean, look at George Lucas.
Oh God. Version 6 of Jabba the Hutt. I
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
that. And like I said earlier, this was the first time it had really properly been done. So kudos to him for doing it. It just doesn't look very nice.
Yeah.
So one of the filmmakers, I think one of the producers, says pulling off the shot took pretty much every visual effects trick in the book, and a few of these tricks they had to develop themselves. And a lot of these methods are now commonplace in the effects industry. So bravo! Just don't do motion capture, people, again. That's the main example I want to use for the first half of the film, where you said they're showcasing the ship.
Yeah.
But you do see other examples of this kind of layering of effects.
Yeah, because it's not always obvious, is it? That's the thing. It's like you say, layering. It was all done in such small ways sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I've said to you before we started, like the eating in the restaurant, like just opening the doors, looking out onto the promenade deck. Well, they had to add the sea and the sky and the people. Do you know? It was like, and like you're not concentrating on that as a shot. That's just in the background.
There's probably rarely a shot where there's nothing that's been altered in some way or another.
Yeah.
And we see the same thing in the engine rooms, even when the iceberg hits. It's these live action environments or models shot with a motion controlled camera, green screen elements added in either as foreground or background, then added CGI elements to blend the two together, whether that's extra ice falling or more smoke here, just to sort of blend, it's that third layer. So in terms of, does it all work? If you squint your eyes, yes. There was some problems with textures and depth and detailing. Not everything looks quite right, especially when they're
But
fully CGI
understandable at the
environments.
time.
Absolutely, this is the thing. Yeah, it's an unfair criticism, but yeah. Considering parts of the film are absolutely exquisite, and some of the bits later on as well are just so
it just
fantastically done.
highlights the things that aren't.
Yeah, part of the problem is that these earlier shots are done in the broad daylight shots, so you see see the cracks and you see the edges and all these things, and everything's a little bit exposed. So then it's a shame because the rest of the film actually relies much more on practical stuff. This is the sinking of the ship in question. And in a way, it's kind of used to a much greater effect because visual effects were minimal. So I've just split this into two. There's all the internal stuff, and this revolves around the flooding of the rooms, mostly practical, almost all of it actually. So the real sets, the beautiful sets that you described at the beginning, they knew we're all going to get destroyed. They were going to use them. And in a way, then they all perform multiple functions before, during, and some of them after the sinking.
Yeah, they were all built inside the tanks.
That's right.
So
Huge
that they
water
could be
tanks
sank,
on tilting platforms. So rather than necessarily flooding water into all the scenes, they would lower or they would tilt, meaning that the water could creep up those haunting shots of the the water coming under the doors or along the carpets. But with that meant that they also had to reset entire scenes.
Oh god, I can't imagine. Like the behind the scenes of having to clear up the dining room,
the dining room
all
especially.
the plates and put. Oh god.
Yeah, and brush the water back out the carpet.
I mean, how long did it take before you could do another take?
No, they never mentioned it in any of the behind the scenes. I wish they had.
It must have been a long while before they could actually redo a scene.
The most famous one though is obviously the staircase.
Yes.
Just to put it in perspective, the water to us in Celsius was about 15 degrees. There was concerns about long-term exposure. It is actually.
Yeah, still bloody cold.
And hypothermia concerns as well. So in this one, slightly different because not only did you have the water being forced into the set from below, which then filled the corridors and rose up the staircase, stunt extras everywhere. But they then had to cascade it down from above from this massive tank of water to break the glass dome.
Yeah, and that was a 24-foot in diameter dome.
Yeah,
that it was no small feat.
Yeah, I don't know how many takes they did of something like this, but I know that there were cameras set up everywhere. So each time, if they did it, must have been only once or twice. I'm not even sure if they did
it again. It was once or twice, I think.
Yeah,
that was it.
So yeah, it was really important that they captured all that. The preparation must have been, immense.
It looks scary though, even watching them shoot the scene, because the
real?
water's coming up, like it was coming up to the ceiling, and there were still extras there.
It's bizarre that not more people were hurt.
It was scary to watch. It really was. I mean, you can see a little scuba diver with his tank of oxygen in the background, but even so, I mean, that's not something I would be comfortable doing.
No. I mean, yeah, fair play to the stunt people on that film because.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah, I wouldn't like it.
some rooms were too expensive to flood, so they were either scaled
Yeah.
down models. One particular shot, which I'll admit I mistook for a visual effects shot, is one of it's a steerage corridor. And what happens in the film is that the camera pulls back very quickly as water is sort of it just cascades and crashes through,
it does. Yeah.
rips all of the doors out as it goes. And I thought that's visual effects. It didn't look real to me.
Yeah.
In fact, this is a small 20/30 feet long scaled down corridor that had wall panels and doors that were designed to break when water was.
In certain places.
Yeah, and they've just fired it through, pulled the camera back dead fast, and then just tilted it,
Yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah.
It's a very effective shot. It's a very scary shot, but I did think it was CGI.
The miniatures that they created are actually superb. I mean, some of them, the dining room where the band are playing in the foreground, but that background's a miniature
That's it. Yeah,
set.
yeah.
It's absolutely incredible, the miniatures that they used.
How they doubled up. They could have used it for just flooding, or they could have used it for just long shots. But no, every
Really
scene
creative.
had multiple uses.
Yeah.
For other sets that were only primarily intended for the scenes prior to the sinking, and that we never see filling with water, like the first class smoking room where Mr. Andrews is stood against the mantelpiece.
Yeah.
These were built on just normal level stages. So instead, to show the tilting of the ship, they used very old school effects. This is hilarious. Tilt the camera. Actors, lean. Can you lean, please? And all the props and stuff where possible, they were rigged to look like they were on
the glass.
the glasses.
The glass with the drink in it that's actually
on its
like,
side.
on the side. Oh,
yeah.
That is so clever, and they just pull it off with a string.
Exactly, yeah, pulling things off the mantelpiece. These are my favourite kind of things because they're just so clever.
So clever.
One other example, it's my last example of the more internal things, is that when it came to people sliding down the ship, that was at that point in the story meant to be about 45-degree angle. It was actually done when the set's only at about 6 degrees. So the stunt people, instead, they were on sort of cables, like weighted cables that would pull them.
Yeah.
And their life jackets had very small wheels underneath.
Little wheels
on
them, yeah.
So they could be pulled down the corridor and released, and that would mean that they could just
Yeah, they did that
tumble
with
the rest of the way.
With the servant Trudy, didn't they? Little wheels on the front of the life jacket.
It's not funny, really, but
it's not. No,
it's kind of funny.
But it's very clever. It's very clever what they came up with to
and
portray
again,
it.
Just tilt the camera, and you've got the illusion of gravity. Brilliant, amazing. Which then. Last part of the effects then is all the external stuff. So it got to a point where everybody's kind of above board. Everyone's on the decks.
Yeah.
So there was one model of the ship. I don't know if this was their biggest in total. It was about 744 feet. Again, in sections, it was never shown really in full. The front 180 feet or so were disconnected, so that could be raised and lowered, and that's where you see the front end of the ship going under. You literally almost exactly see sinking because it goes under, and these are real people on real sets. Nothing CGI was done.
And again, it looks scary.
Well, because you know it's real.
When they actually call action,
and
people
are screaming because you just want to get out.
Yeah. Oh, it looks horrifying to film.
In fact, I think the only major visual effect shots really in this whole part is the stitching together the different parts of the ship. So in one point, the camera seemingly, I have to keep saying seemingly because it never actually happened, would run the full length of the ship, and rather than using miniatures here, they would have the real actors running, which just made it all the more realistic. Again, tilting the camera to exaggerate the tilt of the ship. Then we get to the poop deck, which was obviously the last section of the ship to go down. This was a set built to go to the full 90 degrees because it had to in the end. This part, I mean, there must have been, I think they said about 150 extras, 100 stunt people, just to give the illusion of the chaos that was going on. But it was all very safe as well, because obviously at this point we have people falling off, hitting stuff. Everyone was sort of cabled up. They had protective pads.
Yeah, they coated everything in rubber, didn't they?
Rubber and sort of foam, things that would they could bounce off, and including some like rubber dummies of bodies that would either line the bits that they couldn't do in rubber.
Yeah.
So I like
it's very
that
clever.
It's
very clever.
I think practical effects are always more clever than visual effects.
Yes, well, you have to be, don't you? That's the thing. thing. You've got to be creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the ship breaking in half, another model, about 65 feet, was made in a water tank with a sort of a rip point in the middle and some pyrotechnic explosions. That's all I need to say on that. And
Yeah.
then for the very last part of the sinking, where we see from above, obviously you've got Jack and Rose on the railings, and it goes straight down. That's
Yeah.
a 1/4 scale model that's lowered into the water. Digital extras, I know, don't like them, but they were there. They were made to react as soon as the water would hit them or rise to their level. Digital mist would help blend the two together, and then you've got the green screen element of them on the railing of the ship in the foreground.
Yeah.
Finish it off with a digital camera shake. That was probably the last of the big visual effects shots.
Yeah.
But yeah, my real emphasis is practical effects for all of this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the only other thing I can think of is the stunts, the jumping into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, they could do it, obviously, but by the end of it, it wasn't actually a 200-foot drop as you would
Yeah,
expect.
it wasn't possible. Yeah.
So they would film bits of people jumping, falling, tumbling, and then they would just take over with a CGI character for the rest of the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Seamless.
And long story short, that's how they made Titanic.
Yeah.
Whew.
When you watch the film and then you go back and watch how they actually created it, so much went into it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I think
Unbelievable.
people underestimate the film, really. They disregard what was actually involved in creating it. And it is a huge feat that they accomplished here. It really is.
They could have taken a lot of shortcuts.
They could. They
But they
really
didn't.
could. And I respect it all the more for that. So we're going to, before we jump into the legacy, I just want to obviously remind us that it was a real event.
Of course, yeah.
And obviously it did happen. So what came from it? Because a lot did. Molly Brown, for instance, we've mentioned her before, obviously. After the sinking, she commissioned the making of medals for the crew of the Carpathia to show the gratitude from the survivors, because this was a huge thing. It changed people's lives. They were never the same. There's a picture of one guy who was a passenger on the ship. Shows you a picture of him a couple of weeks before and then a couple of weeks after, and his hair had gone white. There was a lot of survivors' guilt, and obviously I won't go into it too much, but there was a lot of suicides.
Yeah.
Over the years afterwards, there really was. The Titanic sinking changed many aspects of Edwardian life. There'd never been a man-made disaster of this scale. In the boom of transatlantic travel in the era before World War One had started, it was a huge impact on people, and the frailty of man-made invention. We're not invincible.
Exactly. Yeah.
People
got carried away.
Yeah, they did. They did. And we do now, though. We haven't learned the lesson. We rely so much on technology, and it does show a mirror up to what we like now, really.
And look at GDPR
we haven't changed
now.
a lot. We have not changed a lot in the century or so it's been. Maritime laws were completely reevaluated. It was concluded safety laws were grossly outdated. The border trade regulations for lifeboat capacity was previously worked out by tonnage. So the lifeboat law stated any British ship over 10,000 tons must carry 16 lifeboats. Well, Titanic had 20, so they were well within the requirements. However, the law was outdated. It had not been changed since 1894, when the largest ship was 13,000 tons. Titanic was 46,000 tons. The sinking came came enough lifeboats for everybody on board. It was mandated that lifeboat drills had to be done and inspections had to be made. But it's mad because the amount of people on a ship, it wasn't considered relevant before that. It's mad.
Health and safety now.
I know. Funded in 1914 was the International Ice Patrol, so 13 nations committed to sharing the costs to have the shipping lanes observed throughout the year, and that goes on to this day. They monitor and report any possible sea threats to traffic. And that's so important. It became mandatory to have 24-hour wireless under the Radio Act of 1912. Communications must be 24 hours with a secondary power supply, so
Turned
you
on.
didn't miss any distress. Exactly. It was decided that red rockets must be interpreted as a sign of help needed due to the ambiguity regarding Titanic's rockets on the night. It was determined that rockets at sea represented distress signals only. therefore there would be no misrepresentation of the situation.
Yeah.
And lastly, the ship design was improved. All ships had double bottoms, extended up to the sides to create a double hull. And the bulkheads were heightened to make the compartments fully watertight.
Yeah.
And all the implemented changes were put in place to avoid anything like Titanic ever happening again.
It's a sad fact, though, isn't it, that a lot of the time, and even still today, it takes a disaster.
Yeah, it always does.
People just to open their eyes and see
It
actually
does.
what the hell this is completely wrong.
And obviously with Titanic, a disaster of this size at that time, this was pre-World War One by 2 years. Nothing of that size had been dealt with. So even something that you would never think about it, but the amount of bodies that were coming in, because they did recover a lot of the bodies because they were on the water. A lot of life jackets, obviously, they were floating. So a lot of ships were sent out from Canada and they came back to Halifax. But it was the storing of them, and the modern day identification system was created with Titanic, because they had to have some kind of filing system for how to deal with the tragedy and all of the people that were coming in. So the modern day system, brown hair, blue eyes, blah 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 blah, everything they had to put down, that was created then. There was a lot of changes that came from Titanic.
I think Rose wouldn't have helped giving the wrong name when she got saved.
No, I mean, that just complicates matters completely. It's just a disaster for anybody doing the filing. So I'm going to jump into the legacy, but the first little bit I'm going to discuss is about the original song and the score. So James Horner had worked with Cameron on Aliens in 1986. He was known for Field of Dreams, Apollo 13, Legends of the Fall, some massive films. Personal favourite of mine. He watched over 30 hours of footage. That Cameron sent him, because he wasn't editing before he was just shooting everything. So he just basically put all of the best shots together and sent it to him to watch. So he was fully invested in the Romeo and Juliet story aboard the Doom ship. And most films have a signature theme, don't they? I mean, there's one thing that's remembered. And my husband was arguing the point with me the other day, because I said Titanic is the greatest score of all time, and he was like, well, no, it's not. And I was like, yes, it is. I said the entire score collectively is memorable. Other films, what do you remember? And he was like, well, Pirates of the Caribbean. I was like, yes, there's one theme. Braveheart, 2 themes. Gladiator, 2 themes. There's a couple, but Titanic's entire score, you've got truly memorable pieces. You've got the uplifting, exciting leaving port and take her to sea, Mr. Murdoch.
I don't like that one.
Romantic. Well, personal taste. You've got the deeply romantic, like Rose, and you've got the dramatic, foreboding ones like the death of Titanic and sinking. The score has a complete arc. It tells its own story. Each track is different, and that is so unlike many other scores. I really do personally feel that a lot of other scores, if you listen to the whole soundtrack, they just kind of melt together, and a lot of them sound the same.
Yeah, they can do.
But Titanic, it really does have its own separate themes all the way through, which I think really works.
The thing about that, the departure scene that I said I don't like, is that like children's like keyboards, like piano keyboard, and there'd be an option for choir, and you click on it, and it would just go oh 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 oh. That whole track, like, could you not have got a real choir? That's just for one track. It's just one track that sticks out.
So James Cameron specifically told James Horner he did not want a song.
No,
in his
I
movie.
just read this today. But funny enough, he said he didn't want to be criticised for going commercial.
Yes.
He's just added in a love story.
He's just added a Romeo and Juliet on top of a sinking ship. But he didn't want to go commercial.
No.
Yeah. So he told him he did not want a song in his movie. But Horner disagreed. So he wrote a track. And he went to in secret. Yeah. He went to Celine Dion to make a demo. She hated it. Oh. She did not like the song. She was miming to her husband in the background. Don't like this. And she didn't like it. Her husband disagreed. He heard that it was something, and he urged her to record the demo. So she recorded the demo, and he went back. And when James Cameron was in a really good mood, he serious true story. When he was in a good mood, he showed him the track.
Mm.
and he said, "Oh, that's got the themes from the movie. Is that Celine Dion?" And he really liked it.
I mean, come on, it's Celine Dion.
I know. And I have to say, this is the thing that just I find so amazing. The song "My Heart Will Go On" that you hear over the credits
Yeah.
is the demo track.
I noticed
She
that.
never recorded the song again. That is the demo track that you hear.
Yeah.
She is that perfect
She's an
that
11.
she didn't have to do it again. I
Yeah.
just find that absolutely amazing. And she has, I mean, it's become her signature song.
Yeah.
And she has since sang it hundreds and hundreds of times. And she has admitted that she was wrong. It is a good song. And that won Best Song at the Academy Awards as well.
No surprise.
So, media and publicity. Obviously today we're used to all of the the magazines and the newspapers, and obviously with social media as well, we get so much more and we hear things immediately. But at the time it just wasn't the case. But Titanic changed things, it really did. He pitched the film Titanic to 20th Century Fox by planting a Titanic book on a table and saying Romeo and Juliet on this ship. And it was unlike nothing else that had been before it. He not only convinced them with that tiny pitch, but he also convinced them to fund the expedition to the wreck site.
Wow.
They paid for that.
Crazy.
So the media scrutiny coming back from this at the time of the production was unlike anything that's ever been known at that time. The budget for the film kept climbing. It became the first film to have a $200 million budget, which was huge at the time. I mean, that's nothing now. We've hit 300, 350 now. But that caused real strain for the studio. But Cameron just said, "We're doing spectacle. Spectacle costs money." So 20th Century Fox, they just couldn't afford the costs. So they brought in Paramount to share in the burden, which was an unprecedented deal at the time. So with that, I mean, the headlines, there was no well-known leads for the film. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio became a huge star from Romeo and Juliet whilst they were filming. But before and while they were doing it, they didn't have stars. These were unknowns, really. So the headlines for some of this was just Titanic will sink, pun intended. All of this was just in the industry papers almost daily. Industry professionals just couldn't see how the film was going to possibly make its money back and be a success for the studios. But it turned out that they had nothing to worry about, really. So Titanic, like we said, had a $200 million budget. It was released the 19th of December 1997 to a phenomenal reaction. Led the film to land in a box office record of over $1 billion.
The first film to do that, is that right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. That's right, yeah. It remained number one for 15 consecutive weeks. Truly earned a blockbuster status. The money can be seen on the screen.
Yeah.
This was the number one film for 12 years until James Cameron broke his own record with Avatar. Yeah, exactly. I know. The romance element of Titanic proved a huge success, despite what a lot of people had said, and even historians, coupled with Leonardo DiCaprio's heartthrob status that he now had. The film appealed to the teenage girl demographic most strongly. So it was discovered that 60% of Titanic's audience was female.
All right.
And that 63 of those were under 25. And of those under 25s, 45% of them had been to see the film more than twice.
Yeah.
Couldn't get enough of this film.
Looking at the film today, it's hard not to see it as sort of, at times, a parody of itself. And that's because it's become so classic and iconic. It lends itself so well to meme culture nowadays.
It does. It really does.
Just to list a couple, why this ship can't sink. The spinning dance that they do. The King of the World line. I want you to draw me like one of your French girls. I'm flying, Jack. It's been 84 years. It was the most erotic moment of my life. The quartet going down on the ship, the hand on the car window, the floating door, I'll never let go. That's just like a summary list of the things that are kind of poked fun at now.
I think that shows the success of a film.
Yeah.
That's part of what you love about films like that, the corny bits. When you go back and it's the nostalgia, isn't it? That's that you go, oh, it's so corny, but I love it.
Yeah. But I think also when you said some people give the film a bad rep, like they won't give it the time of day because they forget.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of because of this sort of internet culture that we've got.
It is. It is so because of that,
Mm.
and that's why I think everything we've gone through today, I think I really wish people would look at it again.
Mm.
It's the human element that he created, this love story that put it on the ship, that gave it that emotion and made you feel for everything that was going on.
Yeah, and everyone.
That's its staying power. Yeah,
I suppose
that's
so.
the staying power it has. So awards success was naturally going to happen.
Yeah.
On the 23rd of March 1998, James Cameron literally declared himself king of the world. That didn't go down very well. I don't think a lot of people got the joke. With 11 awards, as you stated in the quiz, Titanic tied with Ben-Hur for the most Academy Awards won in Oscar history.
Yeah.
It also became the first film to win Best Picture without a screenwriting nomination since 1965's The Sound of Music, which we've just done.
We've just done
an
that
episode.
one. Yeah.
Yes. To this day, it's still one of the films with the record for most nominations, 14 in total, which it shares with All About Eve and now also La La Land.
That's right.
And James Cameron won Best Director.
Yeah.
Titanic also dominated the Tech Awards, obviously.
Yeah.
Taking the Oscar for sound effects, editing, sound, art direction, cinematography, costume design, editing, visual effects, original song, and score. So it was just huge. It's brought so many new generations to the historical event. And it keeps going. It's still going. It's brought so much money into commemoration. And I didn't mention, actually, this was my dissertation topic when I was doing my master's degree with you, Matt.
I was there.
You were. So my dissertation topic was studying the importance of cinema with commemoration and with museums, and how that they help through mass audiences and how they're fundamental to how we remember events. The money that's been put into Titanic, the Belfast Quarter, that's been created, the museum there, and you can go and see the dry dock and stand where the Titanic was built. It's incredible. You can go to so many places around the world. You can go to Ireland, Copenhagen Island. You can go to Halifax in Canada. You can go to Southampton and Liverpool. It's worldwide, really. It affected so many people. To give it life to the kind of people's ancestors, it brought their family back to life. The film. Isidore and Ida Strauss's great grandson saw the film when it came out, and he was so impressed by the detail he didn't want to leave the cinema. And he did meet James Cameron. He really was thankful for the movie. It did a lot of good. It wasn't just a blockbuster movie that made loads of money. And because of the film's success, James Cameron was able to go on 2 more expeditions and complete 33 dives to the wreck. And through those expeditions, they've just made so many discoveries that have changed how we understand and what we know about Titanic.
Yeah.
He has said that we can never say what happened, but we can say what possibly happened.
Yeah.
And that's important for historic events. I mean, we're now 108 years away from the event, and we know a lot of things about it that other historical films can't say the same.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
And he also said, which I really, really think is so important, he said this wasn't just a story. This really happened to real people, and we need to honour what happened and the people that died and their families. And as filmmakers, we have to understand that responsibility and get it right.
Yeah, well
and
said.
I don't think another film has gone to that kind of level to make it historically accurate. I can't think of another example of where someone has gone to the lengths they've gone to make it so historically accurate. Titanic should be looked at again.
Yeah.
It's my favourite film of all time.
I don't suppose it's going to be your recommendation this week, is it?
It is.
Is it
It
actually?
is my recommendation.
You know
It
what?
actually is.
I'm glad
yes.
you've done that, because I thought we might have gone for the same one otherwise.
No, this is my recommendation. I really want people to go back and give it a go. I really think they should reevaluate and go and see.
Yeah.
And then let us know what you think. Do you agree?
Yeah.
do you disagree with what we've said?
Look at it with a new lens.
Yes, exactly, exactly. What's your recommendation?
Well, I thought maybe we should go with a boat theme, so I've gone with the Poseidon Adventure.
Oh,
Funnily
that's
enough,
a classic
a
movie.
lot like Titanic, but different. So, fictional ship.
Yes.
Final voyage, not first voyage. From New York, not to New York.
Yes.
Tsunami, not iceberg.
And lots of stars.
Exactly, yeah. The whole appeal of it. It sounds horrible. Luckily, this one is fictional. There's there's a
Yes.
German word, Schadenfreude, which means pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. But that's what disaster films from the 70s were like.
Oh, it's peak disaster movie. It's like that and Tower and Inferno and
Earthquake.
put all the stars in one place.
And kill them off one by one.
Kill them off. Do you know, I really didn't like the Poseidon Adventure when I was a kid.
It's
I found
scary.
it really traumatic.
Well, it's brutal.
All of these people dying.
Yeah. Why it feels so scary is because all of the effects are practical. And although they're kind of funny at times, and that's part of the fun of the film, I think, even though it's not meant to be a comedy,
definitely.
but you kind of laugh at it. It's sort of ultra realistic in that sort of twisted sense because you know they're doing stuff for real.
It was.
But yeah.
And if they'd have killed Charlie's granddad from
I was just
Willy
going to say
Wonka and
Grandpa
the
Joe.
Chocolate Factory, I would have literally. I don't think I could have handled it because Shelley Winters going, and that was bad enough.
Gene Hackman, obviously. Ernest Borgnine was in there. Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters does a magnificent dive towards the end.
She does, yes.
Grandpa Joe, Leslie Nielsen's in there as well, obviously playing his typical captain kind of role.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. I love the idea of the set being an obstacle course. It's like, it's pure joy. So yeah.
I haven't seen it for years, but I find it very difficult to go back and watch it because just something of the child in me has stuck with it, and I just find it completely traumatizing to watch. So, obviously, same as last time we were here, there's really no major news apart from the fact that there is no news.
Yep.
That is the news. So that's it, really.
It is.
Where can they find us, Matt?
Well, you can find us on the CineChat website. That's cinechat.co.uk. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, or iTunes. Search CineChat Podcast, CineChat Pod, or CineChat_official. Or you can email us at
podcast@cinechat.co.uk.
Yay!
I really enjoy that bit.
I should give you the wordy bit for once and see what happens.
So, Matt, what's our next episode going to be?
Toyed with this, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
But no, I thought while we're on the topic of dissertation topics, a film that dominated both my masters and my undergrad was Cloud Atlas.
Yeah.
Just for the sheer complexity of how it's constructed.
Absolutely.
And I think the lesson at the end of this one would also be go back and see it if you haven't already with new eyes.
Well, I'm going to have to, aren't I?
Oh,
it's
no,
my
yeah.
homework.
Well, you're going to have to. Yeah.
It's my homework.
How the tables have turned.
I know.
But yeah, so we'll be looking at everything from adapting from the novel, narrative structure, to all sorts of linking devices, combining genres together. Yeah, all sorts of stuff happen from a narrative perspective that just make it one of the most complex and underrated cinematic experiences, I think, of recent years. I do genuinely stand by that.
It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, be fun. And that'll be end of April. That'll be coming out.
Yes.
But until then, hope you've enjoyed the episode.
Yeah.
And it's goodbye from me in the meantime.
And it's goodbye from me.